Beneath the Emerald Canopy, a forest cult horror. The postcard felt flimsy in Elara's trembling hand. The single looping script, a stark contrast to the chilling message it conveyed: the Verdant Embrace awaits. It had arrived a week after her brother, Finn, vanished into the sprawling, notoriously dense Emerald Canopy forest. The local police, with their weary sighs and routine missing person reports, offered little comfort. They spoke of Finn's off-grid tendencies, dismissing his disappearance as a voluntary departure. But Elara knew Finn. Impulsive, yes, but never without a word to her. The only lead was this cryptic card, postmarked from Oakhaven, a secluded town bordering the forest, a place whispered about in hushed tones by locals' tales of strange gatherings and an insular community devoted to the Verdant Embrace. A cult, Elara's gut screamed. Now, the Emerald Canopy loomed before her, a wall of ancient trees whose interlocking branches choked out the sunlight, creating a perpetual twilight beneath. The air hung heavy, thick with the cloying sweetness of unseen blossoms and the damp, earthy scent of decay. It felt less like a forest and more like the breath of something ancient and watchful. Ignoring the prickle of unease that danced on her skin, Elara shouldered her backpack, the weight a meager anchor in the growing storm of her anxiety. She had to find Finn. The initial trail was barely a suggestion, a faint parting in the dense undergrowth marked by weathered stones arranged in peculiar spirals. As Elara ventured deeper, the forest seemed to close in around her, the silence amplifying the frantic thumping of her own heart. It wasn't a natural silence. It was a held breath, an anticipation of something unseen. Within the first hour, subtle disturbances began to fray her nerves. Twisted branches that resembled skeletal limbs reaching out. Patches of withered flowers arranged in unnatural circles. And then the sounds. Not the typical rustling of wildlife, but something else, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like bone against wood, echoing from the deeper woods. The path, if it could be called that, veered sharply, leading her away from any semblance of a maintained trail. It narrowed, forcing her to push through thickets of thorny bushes that snagged at her clothes. The air grew colder, and the feeling of being observed intensified, as if unseen eyes were tracking her every move from the shadows. She stumbled upon a clearing, a small, unsettling space where the trees seemed to lean inward, as if in silent congregation. In the center, a crude altar of stacked stones was stained with a dark, viscous substance that Elara didn't want to identify. More of those unsettling spiral symbols were etched into the stones. A wave of nausea washed over her. As the already meager light began to fade, painting the underside of the canopy in bruised purples and sickly greens, the forest's atmosphere became palpably hostile. The shadows writhed and stretched, transforming familiar shapes into monstrous figures. Every snap of a twig under her boots sounded like a deliberate footstep behind her. Then, a scent reached her, acrid and metallic, like old blood mixed with something sweet and sickly floral. It hung heavy in the air, making her stomach churn. She noticed small tokens tied to branches, feathers dyed black, animal teeth strung on twine, and more of those disturbing spiral carvings. Just as true darkness began to engulf the forest, she heard it, a low, guttural humming that resonated through the trees, vibrating in her chest. It wasn't melodic, but primal, a deep, resonant sound that spoke of something ancient and earthly. It seemed to emanate from all around her, a suffocating blanket of sound that pressed in on her senses. Panic clawed at Elara's throat. The humming intensified, and she caught a fleeting glimpse of movement through the dense foliage, pale shapes, gliding silently between the trees. They were too tall, too gaunt to be human. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through her resolve. She wanted to run, to flee back to the relative safety of the forest's edge. But the thought of Finn, lost somewhere within this terrifying green labyrinth, spurred her onward, deeper into the unsettling embrace of the Emerald Canopy. The humming grew louder, and the pale shapes moved closer, and Elara knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was no longer alone. The sight of the pale gliding figures sent a jolt of pure terror through Elara. They moved with an unnatural grace, their forms elongated and indistinct in the deepening gloom, like specters born from the shadows themselves. She pressed herself against the rough bark of an ancient oak, her breath catching in her throat, willing herself to become invisible. The guttural humming pulsed around her, a hypnotic drone that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. Mixed with it now were faint whispers, sibilant and chilling, that seemed to brush against her ears like icy fingers. She couldn't make out any words, but the tone was unmistakable, a chorus of hushed reverence, bordering on fanaticism. After what felt like an eternity, the pale figures drifted further into the woods, their silent passage leaving behind an oppressive stillness. Elara waited, every muscle in her body tense, until she was sure they were gone. The humming, though still present, seemed to recede slightly. Gathering her courage, fueled by a desperate need to know what had become of Finn, Elara continued deeper into the forest, following the direction the figures had taken. The trees grew even closer here, their branches intertwining overhead, creating a suffocating tunnel of green. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness and the metallic tang, now accompanied by a musky, animalistic odor that made her gag. She began to find more evidence of the cult's presence. Crude totems made of woven branches and feathers, adorned with the unsettling spiral symbols. Small fires smoldered in clearings, their smoke carrying the strange, sweet scent. It felt like she was walking through a sacred yet deeply corrupted space. Then she saw them. In a small clearing, bathed in the eerie glow of several flickering torches, a group of figures stood in a circle. They were cloaked and hooded, their faces obscured by shadow. The guttural humming emanated from them, punctuated by rhythmic chanting in a language Elara didn't recognize. In the center of the circle, something lay on a makeshift altar, a dark, indistinct form that sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. Elara hid behind a thicket of ferns, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She strained her ears, trying to make out the words of the chant. They were low and guttural, filled with a fervent intensity that was deeply disturbing. As the chanting reached a crescendo, one of the hooded figures raised a long, curved knife. Elara gasped, her blood running cold as the horrifying implication of the scene crashed down upon her. Suddenly, one of the figures in the circle turned its head, its gaze seeming to pierce through the darkness directly towards her hiding place. Elara froze, her breath caught in her throat. Though she couldn't see their face, she felt an intense, unnerving awareness, as if she had been directly seen. The figure remained still for a moment, then slowly raised a hand and pointed directly at her hiding spot. A collective gasp rippled through the circle. Panic surged through Elara. She had been discovered. Before the cult members could react, she bolted, crashing through the undergrowth, the sound of their startled cries echoing behind her. The humming intensified, now laced with a sense of urgency and pursuit. She ran blindly through the dense forest, branches whipping at her face, her lungs burning. The pale figures she had seen earlier seemed to materialize from the shadows, their silent forms gliding effortlessly through the trees, cutting off her escape routes. The chanting voices grew closer, their eerie rhythm driving her to the edge of hysteria. She could feel their presence all around her, a suffocating wave of malevolent intent. She stumbled and fell, scraping her knees on the rough forest floor. As she scrambled to her feet, she saw one of the cloaked figures emerge from the trees ahead of her, blocking her path. It was taller than the others, its form more defined, and a sense of ancient authority radiated from it. The figure raised a hand, and the humming stopped abruptly. An unnerving silence descended upon the forest, broken only by Elara's ragged breathing. The figure spoke, its voice a low, resonant drawl that seemed to slither into her mind. "You trespass upon sacred ground, child of the outside." Fear choked Elara. She tried to speak, to plead for help, for information about Finn, but no words would come. The figure took a step closer, and Elara could now make out something beneath its hood, a glimpse of pale skin and eyes that glowed with a faint, unsettling green light. "The Verdant Embrace does not welcome intruders," the figure continued, its voice laced with a chilling finality. "You will become part of the Green Heart now." Before Elara could react, other cloaked figures emerged from the surrounding trees, their silent forms closing in on her. She was trapped, surrounded by the unsettling silence and the glowing green eyes of the cult. Her desperate search for Finn had led her into a far more terrifying reality, a place where the forest itself seemed to breathe with a dark and ancient hunger. Rough hands seized Elara, their grip surprisingly strong despite their seemingly frail appearance. She struggled, fear giving her a burst of adrenaline, but there were too many of them. They dragged her through the undergrowth, the rough forest floor tearing at her clothes, towards the torchlit clearing. The chanting resumed, a low, hypnotic drone that seemed to steel her will to resist. The air was thick with the sweet, cloying scent and the metallic tang, now overlaid with the earthy smell of turned soil. As they reached the clearing, Elara saw the altar more clearly. The dark form upon it was human, bound, and still. A horrifying realization dawned upon her. This was a place of sacrifice. The figure with the glowing green eyes stood before the altar, its presence radiating an ancient, unsettling power. The other cult members formed a circle around them, their hooded heads bowed in reverence. Elara was forced to her knees before the leader, the green eyes fixed upon her, piercing and cold, as if seeing into the depths of her soul. "You sought something here," the leader intoned, the resonant voice echoing in the clearing. "What did you seek?" Terror choked Elara, but she forced herself to speak, her voice trembling. "My brother Finn. He came here." A ripple went through the assembled cult members. The leader's gaze remained fixed on Elara, unblinking. "Finn has found peace within the Verdant Embrace," the leader said slowly, a strange, almost serene smile touching their lips. "He has become one with the Green Heart." Elara's blood ran cold. What do you mean?" The leader gestured towards the altar with the curved knife. Elara's eyes followed, and she finally understood the dark purpose of the ritual. "The forest demands its due," the leader explained, their voice devoid of emotion. "To nourish its growth, to maintain the balance. Those who embrace its truth willingly offer themselves." "Willingly?" Elara choked out, her mind reeling in horror. Suddenly, a figure stepped forward from the circle. It was smaller than the others, its movements hesitant. As it raised its head, Elara gasped. It was Finn, but he was different. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were now vacant, filled with a strange, unsettling serenity. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and thin green veins seemed to pulse beneath the surface. He wore the same dark cloak as the others. "Elara," Finn said, his voice flat and toneless. "You should join us. The Verdant Embrace is peace. It is belonging." Tears streamed down Elara's face. This wasn't her brother. This was a shell, something twisted and unnatural. "Finn, what have they done to you?" she cried. The leader placed a hand on Finn's shoulder. "We have shown him the truth, the interconnectedness of all living things, the beauty of sacrifice." Two cult members stepped forward and roughly pulled Elara towards the altar. She struggled frantically, her screams lost in the hypnotic chanting. She saw the curved knife glint in the torchlight. The leader raised it high above her. "The Green Heart welcomes another," the leader chanted, the green light in their eyes intensifying. Just as the knife began its descent, a guttural roar echoed through the forest, closer than the cult's humming. The chanting faltered. The green eyes of the leader flickered with a hint of surprise. From the darkness beyond the torchlight, something large and monstrous crashed into the clearing. It was a hulking figure, its form vaguely animalistic but twisted and unnatural, with glowing green eyes that mirrored the leader's. The cult members screamed in terror, scattering. Chaos erupted. The torches were knocked over, plunging the clearing into flickering shadows. Elara found herself momentarily free in the confusion. The monstrous creature turned its attention to the leader, a horrifying screech tearing through the air. The leader, despite their previous composure, recoiled in fear. Elara scrambled away from the altar, her eyes darting around, desperately seeking a way to escape. Finn stood frozen, his vacant gaze fixed on the monstrous creature. The creature lunged at the leader, its razor-sharp claws tearing through the air. A sickening, tearing sound filled the clearing, followed by a strangled cry. Elara knew this was her chance. Ignoring her terror, she stumbled towards the edge of the clearing, the sounds of the monstrous creature's rampage echoing behind her. The forest, once a place of dread, now offered a sliver of hope for escape. But she knew, deep down, that the horrors of the Verdant Embrace would forever be etched into her soul, and the image of her brother, lost within its unnatural peace, would haunt her forever. Elara plunged into the darkness, the sounds of the monstrous creature's violent rampage and the terrified screams of the cult members echoing behind her. The forest, now shrouded in shadow and the flickering remnants of fallen torches, was a chaotic maze. She ran blindly, branches tearing at her clothes and skin, her lungs burning with each ragged breath. The acrid, metallic scent of blood now mingled with the sweet, cloying aroma of the cult's rituals, a nauseating reminder of the horror she had witnessed. Behind her, the monstrous roars and the dying screams of the cult gradually faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. But Elara knew she wasn't safe. The forest felt alive, watching her, and the memory of the glowing green eyes, both in the cult leader and the creature, sent shivers down her spine. She stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown path and followed it blindly, hoping it would lead her away from the clearing of horrors. The air remained heavy, and the guttural humming, though fainter, still vibrated through the trees, a constant, unsettling reminder of the cult's presence. As she pressed on, she began to notice more of their disturbing markers, intricate patterns of bones and feathers hanging from branches, stones arranged in ever more complex and unsettling formations, and the ubiquitous spiral carvings etched into the bark of ancient trees. It felt like the very forest was defiled, marked by their unholy presence. Then, she found something else, a discarded cloak, identical to those worn by the cult members. Lying beside it was a crudely drawn map on a piece of bark, depicting a series of spiral symbols leading to a central point deep within the forest. This must be their heart, their sanctuary. A terrifying thought struck her, Finn. He hadn't run. He had remained in the clearing, lost in his vacant state. If she wanted to save him, she had to go back, deeper into the forest, towards the heart of the Verdant Embrace. Despite the overwhelming fear, a flicker of determination ignited within her. She couldn't leave Finn to that fate. Taking a deep breath, she changed direction, following the crude map etched on the bark. The path grew darker and more oppressive, leading her through dense thickets and across moss-covered logs. The humming intensified, and the air grew colder, carrying a faint, sickly sweet odor that made her gag. She began to hear whispers again, closer now, more distinct. They seemed to swirl around her, just out of reach of comprehension, laced with a chilling reverence and a hint of something sinister. The path eventually opened into another clearing, smaller than the first, but even more disturbing. In the center stood a massive, ancient tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted, its branches reaching towards the sky like skeletal arms. The spiral symbol, larger and more intricate than any she had seen before, was carved deep into its bark. At the base of the tree, a group of cult members knelt in silent worship, their hooded heads bowed. The guttural humming emanated from them, resonating with the very core of the ancient tree. And then she saw Finn. He knelt among them, his eyes still vacant, his pale skin almost glowing in the dim light that filtered through the canopy. As Elara watched, the ground near the ancient tree began to tremble. A low, rhythmic pulsing emanated from the base of the trunk, and the air grew thick with the sickly, sweet scent. The cult members began to chant, their voices rising in a frenzied crescendo. From the base of the ancient tree, the earth began to crack open. A dark, viscous fluid oozed out, and a low, guttural growl echoed from the depths below. The monstrous creature from the clearing emerged, its glowing green eyes fixed on the ancient tree. The cult members prostrated themselves before it, their chanting reaching a fever pitch. The leader, or what remained of them, their form mangled and bloodied, was nowhere to be seen. Elara realized the horrifying truth. The cult wasn't worshiping the forest. They were worshiping something that lived beneath it, something ancient and monstrous that demanded sacrifice. The Verdant Embrace wasn't peace. It was a pact with an unholy entity. The monstrous creature approached Finn, its glowing green eyes fixated on him. A low, rumbling growl emanated from its chest. Elara knew she had to act now. Finn was about to become another offering to this subterranean horror. With a surge of adrenaline, she grabbed a heavy branch lying nearby and charged into the clearing, towards her brother and the monstrous heart of the Verdant Embrace. Elara charged into the clearing, a primal scream tearing from her throat, the heavy branch held high like a desperate weapon. The cult members, momentarily stunned by her sudden appearance, turned their hooded gazes towards her. The monstrous creature paused its advance towards Finn, its glowing green eyes swiveling to fix on the unexpected intruder. The air crackled with tension, the frenzied chanting abruptly ceasing. The only sound was Elara's ragged breathing and the low guttural growl emanating from the creature. "Finn!" Elara yelled, her voice echoing through the clearing. Her brother remained kneeling, his vacant eyes fixed on the monstrous entity, seemingly oblivious to her presence. The creature let out a deafening screech and lunged towards Elara, its massive form moving with surprising speed. She barely had time to react, swinging the heavy branch with all her might. It connected with the creature's side with a sickening thud, but the impact barely seemed to faze it. Razor-sharp claws swiped at her, tearing through her already tattered clothes and grazing her arm, sending a searing pain through her body. Elara stumbled back, fear momentarily threatening to overwhelm her. The cult members began to rise, their movements slow and deliberate, their green eyes fixed on her with a chilling intensity. They began to chant again, the low hypnotic drone filling the clearing, seemingly empowering the monstrous creature. Elara knew she couldn't fight them all. Her only chance was Finn. Ignoring the pain, she dodged another swipe from the creature and scrambled towards her brother. "Finn, wake up." "It's me, Elara," she cried, grabbing his shoulders and shaking him frantically. His body was limp, unresponsive. His eyes remained vacant. The monstrous creature turned its attention back to Elara, its guttural growls growing louder, more menacing. It stalked towards her, its massive form casting a long, terrifying shadow. Desperation surged through Elara. She looked around wildly, seeking anything that could help them. Her gaze fell upon the ancient tree, the source of the pulsing and the viscous fluid. It felt wrong, corrupted. An insane idea sparked in her mind. If this creature and the cult were connected to this tree, perhaps damaging it could disrupt their power. Grabbing Finn's arm, she tried to pull him towards the massive tree, but he was dead weight. The monstrous creature was closing in. With a final surge of strength, Elara shoved Finn towards the base of the ancient tree and turned to face the creature, the heavy branch her only defense. The creature lunged, its massive jaws opening in a terrifying roar. Elara braced herself for the inevitable. But just as the creature reached her, Finn stirred. His eyes flickered, a spark of recognition, a flicker of his old self, returning to his vacant gaze. He looked at the monstrous creature, then at Elara, a flicker of horror crossing his face. With a guttural cry, Finn threw himself at the base of the ancient tree, clawing at the bark, his movements frantic and desperate. The monstrous creature paused, its attention momentarily diverted by Finn's unexpected action. Elara seized the opportunity, swinging the heavy branch with all her remaining strength, again and again, at the base of the ancient tree, focusing on the carved spiral symbol. The wood splintered and cracked under the force of her blows. The pulsing from the tree intensified, and the viscous fluid oozed out faster. The monstrous creature roared in what sounded like pain and confusion. The chanting of the cult members faltered, their green eyes widening in alarm. As Elara continued her frantic assault on the tree, the ground began to tremble violently. The air filled with a high-pitched screeching sound that seemed to emanate from the depths below. Cracks spread across the clearing floor. The monstrous creature staggered back, its glowing green eyes dimming. It let out a final agonizing roar before collapsing onto the cracked earth, its massive body dissolving into a cloud of black dust. The cult members screamed, their chanting stopping completely. The green light in their eyes flickered and died, their bodies collapsing to the ground like empty husks. Finn lay at the base of the tree, his breathing shallow, his eyes slowly regaining their focus. He looked at Elara, a flicker of his old self, finally breaking through the vacant stare. The ancient tree groaned, and the spiral symbol on its bark began to glow with an unnatural green light before cracking and crumbling into dust. The pulsing stopped. The sickly sweet scent vanished, replaced by the clean, earthy smell of the forest after a storm. Silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by Elara's sobs and Finn's weak coughs. The terror was over. The unholy heart of the Verdant Embrace had been silenced. Helping Finn to his feet, Elara looked back at the clearing, at the silent forms of the cultists and the remnants of the monstrous creature. The Emerald Canopy no longer felt oppressive, but simply like a forest, albeit one stained with unimaginable horror. They stumbled out of the clearing, supporting each other, leaving behind the remnants of the nightmare beneath the Emerald Canopy. The scars of what they had witnessed would forever remain, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within the seemingly tranquil woods. They had escaped the Verdant Embrace, but they would never truly forget the terror they had found beneath the ancient trees.